All right, let's do it. Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Hey, this is Well Read Beard. It's a damn fine day to talk about a book. Today we are here for a book review, and we're going to talk about the latest from the greatest Fairy Tale by Stephen King. First, I'm going to have to say that when I saw this book announced that this was the next Stephen King book we were going to get, I cringed at the title. Fairy Tale? Come on. I mean, you can't be more original than that. Just calling it Fairy Tale. I will also follow up with that the book I'm doing after this one is called Ghost Story by Peter Straub. So while that was my initial reaction, Fairy Tale, really? That it doesn't really bother me that much. Now, there are parts about this book that I really liked. There are parts about this book that I didn't like, and I'm going to try to briefly. Can we talk about a 600-page book briefly? I'm going to try to briefly tell you why. Now, what I will say is that I got this book for my birthday. My wife doesn't buy me a lot of books, so when Stephen King drops a new one, I won't buy it. I'll hint that it's out there, and that way she can get it for my birthday or for Christmas or whatever, because she's guaranteed to know that I don't have it. So she got this book for me. I read the first couple pages. I ultimately did it in audio, and all that magic was there. The magic of having a new Stephen King book in my hands, in my ears, in my head. All of that magic was there. I mean, again, I cut my teeth on King. It's one of the great things about being a mid 40s guy is that, I'm not late to the party. I'm not behind the game as far as Stephen King's work goes. I mean, I was there when I don't know how many were on the shelf, but maybe, when I started, there might have been 15, 18 titles out. I don't know. But the point is I was able to kind of read through everything King had put out at that point, and then branch out and start reading other authors, other horror authors. So, he is the reason I read. There's no question about that. So I hate to be overly critical of something he's done. Now, this was his pandemic project, which that alone, makes it cooler. It makes me care a bit more about it. But in the synopsis, legendary storyteller Stephen King goes into the deepest well of his imagination in this spellbinding novel about a 17-year-old boy who inherits the keys to a parallel world where good and evil are at war, and the stakes could not be higher for that world or ours. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second. I did not read the synopsis, and yes, I know it's called Fairy Tale, and yes, I see the downward spiral staircase, but I had no clue where this book was going. Like, when I got deep into the first 100 pages that I'll talk about in a second, I did not know that this was going to this parallel world type scenario. Maybe I should have, but I didn't know that. So Charlie Reed looks like a regular high school kid, great at baseball and football, a decent student, but he carries a heavy load. His mom was killed in a hit and run accident when he was 7, and grief drove his dad to drink. Charlie learned how to take care of himself and his dad. When Charlie is 17, he meets a dog named Radar and her aging master, Howard Bowditch, a recluse in a big house at the top of a big hill with a locked shed in the backyard. Sometimes strange sounds emerge from it. Charlie starts doing odd jobs for Mr. Bowditch and loses his heart to Radar. Then, when Bowditch dies, he leaves Charlie a cassette tape telling a story no one would believe. What Bowditch knows and has kept secret all his long life is that inside the shed is a portal to another world. King's storytelling and fairy tale soars. This is a magnificent and terrifying tale in which good is pitted against overwhelming evil, and a heroic boy and his dog must lead the battle. Early in the pandemic, King asked himself, what could you write that would make you happy? As if my imagination had been waiting for the question to be asked, I saw a vast, deserted city. Deserted, but alive. I saw the empty streets, the haunted buildings, a gargoyle head lying overturned in the street. I saw smashed statues of what I didn't know, but I eventually found out. I saw a huge, sprawling palace with glass towers so high their tips pierced the clouds. Those images released the story I wanted to tell. Okay, so it's about a boy that finds a portal to another world. Now, I feel, again, this isn't fresh ground. We've been through the wardrobe. We've been through the, what was it? Was it a tunnel? Was it a doorway? What was it that took us back to the Kennedy assassination? You know what I'm talking about, 11/22/63, that's right. We've been in these types of scenarios. We've been in this type of scenarios when the character from our world or from the first world goes into the next world and is this, all of a sudden is the prince who was promised, or the one who was in the prophecy, a la Luke Skywalker or whatever. Right? So we've been Harry Potter, the prince who was promised. We've been in these types of scenarios before. So, that all felt played out, I guess. Now, what I will tell you about this book is I love the first 120 pages or 150 pages or whatever it is, from the point that Charlie, from the beginning to the point that Charlie crosses into this new world. I loved it. I love the non-fantasy portions of this book. Now, I will tell you that I am not, like, the Dark Tower books do not make my top 5, maybe not my top 10 Stephen King books. Now, I will say that I have only read the first 4, and I read the first 3 of them twice because I was going to try to do like a reread, of everything I'd read, because I read the first 3 in high school. I bought Wizard and Glass like the day it came out, so I was here for that, and that was it. That's as far as I went. I think Wolves of Calla is the next one. I did not go any further. I'm told that the payoff is worth it. I'm told that the payoff is extraordinary. I'm like most, I think, when, I was pulled into the characters introduced in the drawing of the 3. I enjoyed The Wasteland, Wizard and Glass, which is, vastly a flashback to Roland's younger days, kind of lost me. I was didn't really care much. I'm not much of a fantasy reader either, so that may have something to do with it. But the point I'm trying to make is that The Dark Tower is not amongst my favorite Stephen King stories. I'm way more into his horror. That said, I like, the way he writes, and I like the way it makes me feel, and the nostalgia I have for all the old books. Again, the first 120 pages, Charlie, his mom dies in a hit-and-run accident on a bridge. I liked the circular quality of the bridge, the idea of the bridge and the river underneath it coming back up. I liked that stuff. Charlie's dad becomes a drunk, and he makes a promise to God that if his father will stop drinking, he would do anything. He would do, whatever God wanted him to do. And so he comes upon this house. There's a dog barking, sounds distressed. He checks it out. An older man, Howard Bowditch, has fallen off of a ladder. He is injured. And this is Charlie's thing, right? This is my calling. I'm supposed to take care of this dog while the old man is hurt, to take care of the old man. This is my thing. And we spend 120 pages building a relationship with the old man, and the strangeness about his reclusive nature, and about the bucket of gold in the safe, and the shed and what's in the shed, and the creatures that have come up out of the well, the hole, the stairway that we later find in the shed. But it's all about Radar, man. It's all about the boy and the dog and the boy. We fall in love with Radar, but Radar's old. Radar is old and dying and going and getting worse every day, and we're having to deal with that. And I have an aging dog, a very very old dog, and those parts were difficult to read because we're close, and I don't have a what's the word I'm looking for? A clock, not a clock. Damn it, what the hell? A sundial. I don't have a sundial. A sundial plays a part in this book. So, um, I will tell you that we're going to a world that's magic. We're going to a different, a world where the rules do not apply. The rules of age and dog years and all those things don't apply. That's what I'll tell you. So, we're built for, 100 plus pages feeling a certain way about this dog, and things as far as that goes do not happen. I mean, they don't go where you're expecting them to go. So that's a warm, heartfelt. That's a positive thing. But ultimately, I didn't really care about the fantasy part of this book. I didn't really love it. We go there with the dog Radar to try to save Radar's life. That's the gist. We get there, we do the thing. Charlie gets captured. He gets put in this room with 31 other characters, and they're put in this Coliseum type fight to the death scenario. And so we don't really take a lot of time to get to know these characters, even though it's a 600-page book. So when some of them die through this Coliseum Fight Club type scenario, we don't really care. There are some villains in this book. There's some giants. There's a lot of ties to, like, of course, old fairy tales, Jack and the Beanstalk, but there are some giants in this book that are massive, literally and physically, as far as the threat they pose to our protagonist. But it feels like they're when we face them, when those things are forefront in the storyline, that they felt kind of inconsequential, like anticlimactic almost. And that is ultimately the way I kind of felt about the fantasy piece. I mean, the characters, I just didn't really care. I didn't really care much about the characters we're trying to help, the characters we're trying to fight against. There's this sprawling castle with these emerald spires. Again, very Wizard of Oz-ish, but it felt blurry. It felt it just didn't feel fully imagined. Like I'm a big setting guy. I like I like fantasy. One thing I do like about fantasy books is maps. I like maps and knowing where I'm at, like whether it's in a castle like Hogwarts or whether it's in a region like Middle Earth. I love maps and like reading the journey and like flipping back to the map and seeing where we're at, flipping back to the map. Ultimately, I just didn't care about the fantasy part of the book, and then the ending. I liked the ending. I again, the ending within the fantasy world, it didn't really affect me. The ending afterwards, and I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't want to tell you what happens to this character or what happens to that character. But when the story does circle back to our world or to the normal world, I liked the way things wrapped up there. I liked the finality. There's a finality to the way this story ends. And if you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's this closure, this, I don't know, just closure. It's final, the way that this thing ends. And that part I did kind of like. So, I don't want to be overly critical. I'm just not a big fan of King's fantasy. I like his horror, but this book, I loved the characters up front, that part. the development between Charlie and Howard and Radar. And I liked ultimately the end. I felt the fantasy part was just like, it's a long book. It's 600 pages, but it feels like everything in there happens so fast and is so again kind of fuzzy, because like it doesn't feel like fully defined, like character setting, creatures, this and that. It just, and part of that's probably because we spent like 150 pages before we stepped through the door, but that's just me. Ultimately, I'm a big fan. I mean, Stephen King made me a reader. There's no other way to put it. I mean, Stephen King and a sophomore English teacher that let us read whatever we wanted for the first 10 minutes of class every day, and the book Tommyknockers, green paperback cover, made me a reader. So I'm forever grateful. I enjoyed this experience. Like I said, getting the new one, being in the new one. I'd forgotten what it felt like. I haven't read a new Stephen King book probably since Outsider. Like, I didn't do The Institute. I didn't do If It Bleeds. There have been some other ones that I just haven't done. I mean, the last one that I really enjoyed, like, I crazy enjoyed Dr. Sleep. Crazy. 5-star love Dr. Sleep more than I like The Shining. And I don't want to go too deep into that. You're like, more than The Shining? Are you fucking kidding? Seriously, like, my thing with The Shining is I love that book because of all the shit that came from it in my like mental library of horror. But most of the shit that I really, really liked actually comes from the movie. Like, the imagery in my head comes from the Stanley Kubrick movie. I'm getting too far off track, but Hedge Maze is greater than Hedge Animals. I mean, if you don't agree, we just can't. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, so what I'm saying is that I'm a big King fan, but for me, this was just 3 stars. And honestly, like, if not for the fact that I loved the first 120 pages, I would have probably been at it just being okay, which is 2 stars. But the nostalgia, the being in a new one, of course, I completely enjoyed it, and I think I'm back on the hook. I need to go back. I'm going to go back and read The Institute. That's the one that stands out because people like that one as well, I think. Tell me if you like that one down below. Anyway, 3 stars for me. Stephen King, Fairy Tale. It does have those pretty prose bits, though. They are in there. I did it audio, of course, so I didn't, have the, I didn't really mark the things as they came up. But there were some pretty prose bits. So, Fairy Tale, Stephen King, Well Read Beard. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying all your books. Tell me what you thought about Fairy Tale. Tell me what you thought about it. I mean, are you a huge fan of King's fantasy, or are you like me? You got into him because he was a horror author, and the fantasy shit just isn't really your cup of tea. Let me know. And again, God, I'm getting off track again, but I love Lord of the Rings. Loved it. I mean, there are fantasy books that I love that are in my top 10 books of all time. Love that stuff. But The Dark Tower, I wasn't a huge fan of what I've consumed of it. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying all your books, all of them, as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong damn books.